Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Against the Odds. So last week we had another all Ether Revolt Against the Odds poll, and if you're looking to vote in the Against the Odds poll, make sure to follow the link in the description of the video to vote for next week's deck. But we had an all Ether Revolt poll, but with a twist. Instead of standard, we did Ether Revolt in Modern, and it was a new artifact, Inspiring Statuary, that came out on top. So this week we are heading to Modern to build a deck around Inspiring Statuary, which I'm calling Warped Statuary. A quick reminder before we break down the deck: if you enjoy Against the Odds and the other series here on the channel, it would be amazing of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk about Warped Statuary. So the namesake card is Inspiring Statuary, and it was much more challenging to build around Inspiring Statuary than I thought it would be. So on level 1, Inspiring Statuary is essentially a ramp card, but it only ramps for non-artifact spells, but it can be a really powerful ramp card because it turns all of your other artifacts into ramp spells for non-artifact cards. Sounds a little confusing, but it's actually kind of simple. The thing is, Inspiring Statuary requires a couple of different things. On one hand, I don't really like it as just a ramp card. If we want to build just a ramp deck, a straight up ramp deck, in Modern, there's better ways to do it. We have Tron lands, we have tons of powerful cards like Primeval Titan and Rampant Grows. We just have better options for ramping than Inspiring Statuary. So it seems a little silly just to be like, oh, we're going to be Inspiring Statuary and tap it for a mana to cast stuff. That doesn't really encapture everything the card does. The other thing that Inspiring Statuary requires, or at least really wants, is a bunch of artifacts on the battlefield. If we can make a bunch of artifacts, we tap them for mana as well. So I wanted to try to find a deck that not only used the ramping power of Inspiring Statuary, but actively wanted artifacts and a bunch of stuff on the battlefield. We wanted to be able to use both halves of the card. That was my goal. I didn't want to just ramp with it. I didn't want to just take that one aspect of the card and make a deck around it, because I don't think that's the best way of doing it. I mean, if you want a 3-mana Mana Rock, Coalition Relic is most likely better in most situations. It's less restrictive. So we really want a deck that takes advantage of both aspects of the card, and I think we found it. It's a little janky, but we found the right combination of cards that not only takes advantage of the ramping power of Inspiring Statuary, but the part of the card that wants a bunch of artifacts on the battlefield. So we do play a bunch of things that make artifacts to power up Inspiring Statuary, and you might notice most of them are not artifacts themselves. So one of the tricks of Inspiring Statuary is it doesn't ramp us for artifacts, so we wanted cards that were not artifacts themselves, but also made artifacts to power up Statuary. Tireless Tracker's a great example. It's 3 mana, but we can technically cast it for 1 green mana and by tapping 2 artifacts, because it's not an artifact, and then whenever we play a land, we get a clue token, and those clues, we can not only sack them to draw cards, but we tap them for colorless mana. They essentially become Mind Stones with the Inspiring Statuary out. We can use our fetch lands to double up on our clue token, so play Tireless Tracker, Wooded Foothills, get a clue, crack it, get another land, get a clue. Thraben Inspector also makes a clue when it enters the battlefield, so kind of part 1 of our make artifacts from non-artifacts is clue tokens. Part 2 of this package are artifacts, but they work really well with Inspiring Statuary and enable our nut draw, so it might seem weird to see Cogworkers, Puzzle Knot, and Servo Schematic in Modern. But these are cards that on turn 2 essentially double ramp us when we have Inspiring Statuary, because they themselves are artifacts, and then they make a 1/1 servo token, which is also an artifact. So then if on turn 3 we can play an Inspiring Statuary, we can tap both of those artifacts, so it's essentially adding 2 mana, and we'll talk about what that's ramping us into in a minute. So even though these cards are kind of underpowered, they're super good with Inspiring Statuary. It might seem weird to have standard legal cards in these slots, but they really are the best at what they do as far as making multiple artifacts on turn 2 and having one of them being a non-creature artifact so it doesn't die to creature removal. And then the last part of our non-artifact cards that make artifacts package is Pia Nalar and also Pia and Karen Nalar. A little bit of a weird flavor there, but they make Thopter tokens when they enter the battlefield. Pia Nalar makes 1, also a good 3-drop, also allows us to sacrifice our servo schematic to get another servo, can attack with the artifact creatures and pump them up or make things unblockable. Pia and Karen Nalar, on the other hand, makes 2 artifacts and lets us deal some direct damage. We can sack our extra artifacts to shoot down our opponent. So basically, from turns 1 through, let's say 4, 1, 2, 3 we want Inspiring Statuary, 4 we have Pia and Karen Nalar. On those turns, we got tons of things to make artifacts, and then the plan is that we will hopefully have our Inspiring Statuary, and our big payoff is Warp World, with Great Aurora being a backup. So this is the card. I finally found the card that lets us take advantage of both aspects of Inspiring Statuary. So for one thing, having a bunch of artifacts out with Inspiring Statuary lets us cast our Warp World or Great Aurora for super cheap, 3 actual mana. And then the way Warp World works is we shuffle all of our permanents into our library. Our opponent does the same, and then we get to reveal that many cards, put all permanents, except planeswalkers, but all permanents onto the battlefield that we reveal. So basically, if we can have 10 permanents on the battlefield, we shuffle everything in, look at the top 10 cards of our library, put all the artifacts and creatures and enchantments and lands on the battlefield. Great Aurora, similar in some ways. We shuffle everything in and then draw that many cards and then get lands and then hopefully can cast some stuff. But these cards work with both aspects of Inspiring Statuary, because not only are our clues and our Thopters and our servos adding mana to help us cast them, but after we resolve the Warped World or the Great Aurora, they're upping our permanent count, so we get more shuffle-ins and more redraws than our opponent. If we can have 15 or 20 permanents on the battlefield, thanks to all these clue tokens and so forth, and our opponent only has 7 permanents on the battlefield, chances are the Warp World is going to benefit us way more than it benefits our opponent, and then it kind of spirals out of control from there. One of the sweet things about the deck is, and we did this kind of with Great Aurora and Standard, but with Warp World, if one of the cards we shuffle into is a Tireless Tracker, we get a clue for each land that enters off Warp World, so the second copy of Warp World or the Great Aurora is even more insane. Hopefully we will also hit another Inspiring Statuary, so we can theoretically cast multiple Warp Worlds and Great Auroras in the same turn. We cast one, tap all of our artifacts, put a bunch of stuff back on the battlefield, hopefully get even more permanents because of the clues and Thopters and servos, maybe hit another Inspiring Statuary. Our lands enter on tap our artifacts again, cast another one, and the second one should gain us even more advantage because our opponent's deck likely isn't built to flood the board with permanents to take advantage of Inspiring Statuary and also Warp World / Great Aurora, so we generate additional value and kind of win the game by resolving those spells. We also have an I win the game finisher to hit off of our Warp World, and that is Hellkite Igniter. So this one might look really silly, but it kind of works both ways. So it's not an artifact, so we can use our Inspiring Statuary Inspire tap mana to cast it, and then it benefits from having artifacts. So here's the basic idea is we get our Statuary out, we cast a big Warp World, hit a bunch of cards, get a bunch of clues from Tireless Trackers and servos and all that stuff. Hopefully one or even 2 of those cards is Hellkite Igniter, which comes down with flying and haste, and we can pay 1 in a red to pump it, equal to the number of artifacts we control, which is probably going to be 5, 10, 15, so we can one-shot our opponent with Hellkite Igniter off of the Warped World, or even off of the Great Aurora by casting it from hand if we hit enough lands. It also works just with Inspiring Statuary. We can pay 2 red, tap a bunch of artifacts, play a hasty Hellkite Igniter, go attacking, and then pump it a couple times, and hopefully just 20 our opponent on the spot to win the game. We do have some backup plans as well, and those are our Planeswalkers. So kind of the other aspect of this deck is Tron. We're basically like a Tron deck with our Nut Draw. If we can go Artifact on turn 1 from Thraben Inspector, Servo Schematic, or Cogworker's Puzzle Nut on turn 2, that puts us at 3 artifacts. On turn 3, we play Inspiring Statuary. That's 4 artifacts. We're making our land drops. That means on turn 4, we have enough artifacts to tap, along with our lands, to play a Card Liberated or Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Tron. And that's almost as fast as Tron is. Much jankier than Tron is, but almost as fast as Tron as far as getting a hugely powerful planeswalker on the battlefield super early in the game. Mana base wise, apart from the fetches that we talked about with Tireless Tracker, a bunch of shock lands, some of the BFZ duels, which are a little less painful, and a lot of basics, which are nice with our Warped World / Great Aurora. They come into play untapped. And then we have in the sideboard some artifact removal. Wear Tears, also Ancient Grudge. Lightning Bolt and Wrath of God give us some removal to deal with our opponent's stuff. And then some powerful hate cards. Leyline of Sanctity protects us from burn spells, and most importantly, discard, which is super good. One of the problems with our deck is we're really reliant on Inspiring Statuary. We only have 4 in our deck, so we might not draw one, which is problem 1. And when we do draw one, if our opponent thought seizes it on turn 1 or turn 2, everything kind of goes down the drain. So Leyline of Sanctity helps avoid that. Rest in peace for graveyards. Crumble to fight against Tron lands. And that is Warp Statuary for Modern, and that's our Against the Odds deck for this week. So, is this actually going to work? The idea, I think, is solid. I think this is one of the only ways to abuse both parts of Inspiring Statuary. There's not too many cards that actively want you to flood the board with cheap artifacts, apart from Warp World and the Great Aurora. Like, these cards work really well with that plan, and we should get a huge advantage if we resolve them. So I think that part of the deck is solid. Obviously, turn 4 Karn, turn 4 Ugin is very good. That's enough to beat a lot of decks. That's essentially what Tron does, and it works for them, so it should work for us. The problem is, we only have 4 inspired statuaries, so there will be games where we just don't find one, and those games are going to be rough. We don't have a great plan B, just making our land drops, sacking some clues, casting Warp World for 8 mana, casting Karn for 7 mana. That's going to be too slow against a lot of modern decks, even though we can kind of bog down the board a bit with servo tokens and Thraben Inspectors. So I think it's really going to be about Inspiring Statuary. I expect in games when we just resolve an Inspiring Statuary on turn 3 and it actually sticks around, we're going to be able to do some really crazy things. How often we're able to do that is the big question mark with the deck, but I'm excited to try it. So I'm not expecting a insane win percentage, but I am expecting some powerful things to happen when everything comes together perfectly. So anyway, that's our Against the Odds deck for this week. As I mentioned before, if you want to vote for next week's deck, follow the link in the description to the article on the website. You'll find a poll down near the bottom of the article. Make sure to vote in that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos, and I will talk to you soon.